Xenoblade Chronicles Future Redeemed, and a 6-year and over a decade-long story. So was it a fitting conclusion to this, whatever a dual trilogy would be, or does it fall flat on its face? Well, I assume you read the title, so you probably already know the answer. Either way, it's time to talk about the 6th and final game in the Klaus saga. A game that was quite worrying going into release, since a vast majority of its plot and characters got leaked in the data mine of the prior wave of Xenoblade 3 DLC. Which is also the reason I didn't talk much about Xenoblade in the past several months, despite this being a series I love. Either way, we're going to start with talking about content that was added to the base game of 3 with this update. They added a new challenge battle where you can fight the 2 protagonists of the prior Xenoblade games. I think that's really cool. If you beat them, you unlock them as heroes. It's nothing major, but I think it's a really cool little bonus to send off, because it's essentially the 3 protagonists of the mainline games in the series all getting to battle each other, which is really cool, and I really like it. I think the only thing I would have liked more is that they in a way ended up being a free-for-all. But either way, let's get talking about Future Redeemed itself in its former gameplay, as it makes more sense to save the story, and spoilers for a bit later into the video. And one thing that is noticeable incredibly quickly is the balance for these characters is horrible in the best way possible. Most of the party members, if not all, are broken in some really weird way that makes them incredibly fun to use. For example, Rex, who gets to bypass damage stats if he lands crits. His arts recharge faster if he lands crits, and he also has an additional base 1.5 times multiplier on crits, which also increases his damage stat as he gets more crits, and an art that recharges fully if you get crits! So essentially, as Rex, you just get to spam arts constantly and kill everything incredibly quickly. Because why not? It's really fun, and every character has something about them that's like this, which is really cool. And this also helps prevent the game from becoming chain attack simulator like the base game of 3 had, which is one of my biggest complaints with that combat system. And in addition, each character is essentially more well thought out than all the characters in base 3, since the characters in base 3 were given 3 arts they'd have for their class, and 3 they can inherit from any other class. Compared to everyone in this, where they have 6 arts that are designated to them specifically. So instead of having a handful of arts that you can mix and match as you get your characters, you instead have a character who has a fully thought out and cohesive moveset, which is really fun. I also think they learned their lesson from the last game, because in my experience and people I've talked to, Launch was by far better than Burst in every way, and Burst combos just aren't in this game? So, that's a thing. And the map is surprisingly large. As in, I would confidently say it's bigger than both Gormont and Torna in Torna. Or at least Torna. Gormont's a weird case because it was entirely reused, basically. And it's 100% bigger than the Bionis Shoulder from Future Connected. The actual amount of stuff that's in this world to do is insane. In fact, there's an entire area that is entirely optional that you can do, which is super cool. And that's not the only thing like that. There's something in almost every nook and cranny, and if there's something that looks like you should be able to get to, like some random cliff edge you can't climb up, there's probably a way to get up there. Even things like, oh, there's this small thing that requires a jump that looks like it probably has an invisible wall. Nope, there's stuff there. And this game heavily rewards you for exploring, as that's how you unlock new arts, new slots for gems, new accessories. Basically, everything is unlocked through exploring. So yeah, you can rush the main story, but you'll also be at a distinct disadvantage on top of having less experience. Not to mention the surprising amount of enemies that show up in areas after you've already completed them, which also gives you a reason to go back. The starting area reminds me a lot of Torna's beginning, just because it's a very linear forest with a few enemy encounters to teach you the game's mechanics. But either way, it's super fun and really thoughtful. Like, genuinely, I love how explorative this map is, and I honestly think it has more in it to do than any of the locations in Xenoblade 3. I think Xenoblade 3 does have more stuff, but in terms of a single area on Ionios, the area they created for this DLC campaign is by far the most fun to explore, because every nook and cranny has something, either a unique monster or a chest. Also, if you're enjoying and want to see me talk about more JRPGs and Nintendo stuff, please consider liking and subscribing, since it really helps with the channel a lot. Spoilers for the entirety of the numbered Xenoblade games and their respective expansions, so you're safe if you haven't played X. But this entire game feels like a love letter to the entire Xenoblade franchise. And there's definitely a ton of stuff for Gears and Saga fans that I missed since I haven't played those games yet. I was actually gonna play Saga when this game decided to drop out of nowhere, so that'll happen eventually. But the areas being less degraded, since it's only a few hundred, if that, years into Ionios' existence, compared to 1,000 years later, means the resemblance to the structures are more noticeable. Not to mention, you directly have things like, I don't know, the entirety of Colony 9 being there verbatim that I was able to get around perfectly fine entirely through muscle memory or anything. Genuinely, so many things that were so cool and so fun. And hell, I think everyone was surprised when in the trailer and key art for Future Redeemed, we saw Prison Island again. A place of insane significance. And the story is quite fun. I do enjoy the new characters in Matthew and Nell. I hesitate to call Nicole or Glimmer new characters, since they are the children of our protagonists from the prior games. And on a similar note, where is Mithra's child? Like, Mia was heavily implied to be Mia's daughter, and Glimmer is all but stated to be Rex's. So what happened to Mithra's child? Like, didn't you just forget about her, or what? But either way, I really like the cast. And obviously, Shulk is great as always, and Rex had such a glow up that it is insane, and he ended up causing Xenoblade to trend on Twitter when his design got revealed. And I really like making Ontos the main antagonist. I think it's a really cool idea to have the Trinity processor, or at least the one part of it that didn't become a blade and get changed due to human interaction, be the main antagonist of the final game. Because Alvis is just a machine. He is just the programming of a computer. That's all he is. It's like asking Siri if you think the world deserves to be saved or die. A computer is going to choose the most logical effect that works out the best to achieve its goal. And in the event of saving humanity, the people who are only causing war, an AI would want to destroy them, without question. Which is really fun, and really cool, like, just how that's well thought out. And I love the fact they made part of the Trinity processor the antagonist. if you watched my old, like, fixing Xenoblade 3's ending video, that was sort of my idea. I guess 1/6 of it happened, but I really love that idea because it makes the perfect antagonist. Especially since we've seen what the Trinity processor is like. And frankly, I think it's fun to just assume A is just what Ontos would have been if he was used as a blade instead. Although, my only gripe is the whole, well, Numa is supposed to be feminine, Logos is supposed to be masculine, and Ontos is supposed to be in between, and their solution to in between was, well, there's 2 of him, and 1's a girl. I feel like using a more genderless design would have made more sense, but I'm also willing to give it slack because Xenoblade 1 was never even meant to have sequels. Given they could have solved the issue by making Logos/Malos have more of a gender-neutral design and then go with Ontos as the male one. I also love how just casually the children of Sharla and Zeke and Pandoria are just there. And also, that's the most useful anyone related to Sharla has ever been, and she isn't even a party member. And at that, the entire game feels like it's a love letter to the entire Xenoblade series. With areas taken from both, all the affinity scenes, which are just heart-to-hearts again, talking about events from prior games, and the fact the logo is a mix of logos from all 3 games, with Xenoblade 3's logo being the same, the Future and Future Redeemed being taken from Future Connected, and the font used for Redeemed being the same style font used for Xenoblade 2. I freaking love that. It's so cool how there's an attention to detail in everything. And I love how the final boss, Willis is in the gameplay section, I figure it's better to fit in here, uses a thing similar to the ending of Xenoblade 1, where your mechanics are locked away from you, and you have to fight to get them back. Same how you have to fight for the future and fight for the visions that you have in Xenoblade 1. Hell, this is easily one of my favorite final bosses in a Xenoblade game. And probably my favorite of the Klaus saga. As I love it thematically, and it has some really fun callbacks to the older games. And frankly, it's pretty easy to beat the final boss of 3 anyway, so it was guaranteed to not get dead last. But that isn't even talking about the redesigns for Rex and Shulk, which incorporate both of their mentors. Rex losing the eye that Zeke wore an eye patch on for dramatic effect, and Rex losing his right arm the same way Dunban lost use of it due to the Minato. This entire game is a love letter to the entire Xenoblade series. And one of the only critiques I can think of, and the only thing that really brought me out, is the fact they blatantly reused the Klaus cutscenes verbatim from Xenoblade 2, despite 2 having a vastly different art style from 3, and at that they were already out of place in 2 because it was using the art style from 1. Either way, I'm incredibly excited to see what the future of the Xeno series has to hold. And while I'm waiting for that, I'll be going back to see what the past had in store. Either way, hopefully we get an export at some point, and I'll see you guys in the next one.